The day started like any other. I was in the kitchen, coffee brewing, sunlight filtering through the blinds, when Jillian casually mentioned Camille's wedding plans. She said it with such ease, as if she were commenting on the weather or the price of eggs. "It's going to be small," she said, sipping her tea. "Just immediate family." Her voice was light, almost dismissive. I remember gripping the countertop, so hard my knuckles turned white. My stomach dropped, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Camille's wedding, my sister's wedding, and I wasn't invited? The words echoed in my mind, louder each time they repeated. I forced a smile, pretending I hadn't heard, pretending that everything was fine, but inside, something broke. How could I not be included? I had been there for every scraped knee, every broken heart, every milestone she ever reached. I remembered carrying her piggyback after she sprained her ankle at summer camp, staying up all night with her when she was sick, financing those endless ballet classes, even when money was tight. I had always been the one she turned to. And now, on one of the most important days of her life, I was being erased. Betrayal washed over me like a cold wave. Sadness followed closely behind, settling deep in my chest. I felt invisible, unimportant, as though my presence meant nothing to them. It wasn't just about the wedding. It was about the pattern, the expectation that I would always be there, quietly supporting everyone else while my own needs were ignored. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every conversation, every missed sign. Was this how they saw me? A background character in their lives? The thought made my blood boil. Without thinking, I booked a flight to Santorini. A week away from the noise, the expectations, the pain. I needed air, space, silence. I needed to remember who I was outside of being the person everyone leaned on. Santorini was everything I needed and more. The sun was relentless, the sea impossibly blue, the streets winding and full of life. For the first few days, I barely spoke to anyone. I wandered alone, letting the island wrap around me like a warm blanket. I watched the sunset from cliffside terraces, drank wine under strings of lights, and let the weight of years of emotional labor slowly lift from my shoulders. There was freedom in solitude. I began to see myself differently, not as the caretaker, not as the invisible support system, but as someone who deserved care, who had his own dreams, his own worth. I realized how much of myself I had given away, how often I had sacrificed my happiness to keep the peace. In Santorini, I allowed myself to exist for no one but me. Then came the call. My cousin, half laughing, half horrified, told me what happened at the wedding. It had been a disaster. Camille and her fiancé had argued violently during the reception, accusations flying, tempers flaring. Someone spilled wine on the cake. Jillian had been blamed for everything, accused of meddling where she shouldn't have. There had been shouting, tears, people storming out. As I listened, I expected to feel guilt, regret, maybe even the urge to fly back and fix things. But instead, I felt nothing. No desire to intervene, no need to smooth things over. In fact, I felt a strange sense of clarity. Their chaos didn't belong to me anymore. Maybe my absence had forced them to confront their problems without me holding their hands through it. Maybe they finally understood what it felt like to be left out, to be overlooked. And maybe, just maybe, they'd start seeing me for who I really was, not just the guy who always showed up, but someone who had feelings, boundaries, and a life of his own. During those last few days in Santorini, I met Serena, a traveler from New York with a laugh that made me forget my own name. We talked for hours, sharing stories, dreams, fears. There was no pressure, no history weighing us down. Just two people connecting without the shadow of family obligations looming over us. She reminded me that I could build relationships on my own terms, ones where I wasn't always giving, always fixing, always sacrificing. When I returned home, my phone exploded with messages.
Jillian.
Camille. Even my dad. They wanted explanations, apologies, reassurances. But I didn't respond. Not right away. I read their words carefully, looking for signs that they understood why I had left, why I had stayed away. But all I found were excuses, deflections, and the same tired patterns. I realized then that they weren't ready to see me as anything more than the person who was always there. And I wasn't willing to be that person anymore. So, I did something symbolic. I took out my wedding suit, the one I had bought months ago, imagining the moment I would walk into the ceremony, proud and present. I folded it neatly and donated it. Letting go of that suit felt like letting go of an old version of myself, one that clung to approval, to belonging, to a place in a story that never truly included me. Now, my days are filled with hikes, books, music, and quiet mornings where I can hear my own thoughts. I've started saying no without guilt. I've stopped checking my phone obsessively for updates from the family drama. I've learned to prioritize my peace, my joy, my growth. And when I look in the mirror, I no longer see the invisible brother, the silent supporter, the always there friend. I see someone who has fought his way back to himself, who has reclaimed his narrative. This is my story now. And for the first time, I'm standing in the center of it. I didn't expect the silence to feel so loud at first. Coming home after Santorini was like stepping into a familiar room that had been rearranged while I was gone. Everything looked the same, but nothing fit anymore. The messages kept coming for a few days, then slowed, then stopped altogether. It wasn't an angry silence. It was more like confusion. They didn't know what to do with me now that I wasn't orbiting their lives the way I used to. And honestly, that felt like progress. At first, I missed the rhythm of it all. The calls in the middle of the night when someone needed advice or just a voice, the spontaneous dinners where everyone talked over each other and I played peacekeeper, the quiet satisfaction of being the glue. But as the weeks passed, I began to notice something else. How much space opened up when I stopped filling every gap for them. I started sleeping better. I read books cover to cover without interruption. I cooked meals just for myself and ate them slowly, savoring flavors I hadn't really tasted in years. I even signed up for a photography class on a whim. It turned out I had an eye for light and shadow, for capturing moments that weren't mine, but still told a story. I found beauty in things I'd never really noticed before, how the morning sun hit the side of a building just right, or how people moved through the city like rivers, each one heading somewhere important. Serena and I stayed in touch. She sent me photos from her travels, little notes about places she thought I'd love. We never made promises or labeled what we were. It was easy, unburdened by expectation. Sometimes, late at night, we video called and talked until the sky outside my window turned gray with dawn. Those conversations reminded me that connection didn't always have to come with strings attached. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in. Late at night, when the apartment was too quiet, I would wonder if I had been selfish. If maybe I had hurt them more than they deserved. But then I would remember the kitchen, the way Jillian had said, just immediate family, like it wasn't a wound, like I wasn't someone who had given pieces of myself to build their happiness. And I remembered the relief I felt in Santorini, the clarity that came with stepping away. That's when I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. I had simply chosen myself for once. And that choice, however painful at first, was the healthiest thing I'd ever done. I started setting boundaries, not harshly, not with anger, but with intention. When Camille finally called, months later, her voice hesitant, asking if I wanted to meet for coffee, I didn't say yes automatically. I asked her why. She stumbled over her words, then admitted she missed me. Not just my presence, but my perspective. She said things had been different since the wedding, harder, more honest, and that she realized how often she had taken me for granted. We met for coffee. No apologies, no grand speeches. Just two siblings sitting across from each other, learning how to talk again, without pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. It wasn't perfect. There were still misunderstandings, still old habits that tried to creep back in. But I held steady. I didn't rush to fix things when they got tense. I let her sit in discomfort the way I had learned to sit in mine. And slowly something shifted. She started calling less often, but when she did, it felt more real. She shared things without expecting me to solve them. And when I said I couldn't talk because I was in the middle of something just for me, she accepted it. Jillian and I had our own reckoning. She never apologized outright, But one day she showed up at my door with a small canvas painting she knew I'd like. She said she was proud of me, that I had grown. It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement of her part in all this that I ever got.
And it was enough.
I didn't need them to understand everything. I only needed them to see me. And now, finally, they did. I still travel. I've been to Lisbon, to Kyoto, to Reykjavik. I take pictures, I write sometimes, I learn new languages just for fun. I've met people along the way, some fleeting, some who linger longer. None of them define me, and I don't try to mold myself into someone they want me to be. I live in a city I love, in an apartment filled with sunlight and music and books that smell like old paper and possibility. I hike on weekends when I can, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends who ask how I am, not just how the family is doing. Sometimes I think about that man who stood in the kitchen, gripping the counter so hard his hands went numb. He felt lost then, broken even. But he was standing at the edge of something new, though he didn't know it yet. Now, I look back on that moment not with pain, but with gratitude. Because that was the day I decided to stop living in the margins of other people's stories. That was the day I stepped into my own.